Before we get to the video, YouTube, in their infinite wisdom, have decided to demonetize this channel for some reason. So if you'd like us to continue producing these videos, and if you're enjoying them, please do follow the link in the description, go over to lotus.com, sign up for £5 a month, support us, so we can keep doing what we're doing. Thanks. So it's no secret that fertility levels across the world are in massive decline in most places, and obviously not in others. So this is the Wikipedia population fertility map that you can get from 2024. But you notice the framing, right? The blue, and the bluer something is, usually a positive color, that's the lowest population growth or reproductive capacity. And in red, and dark red, when it's done for climate maps, this is the area that's too hot, that's being destroyed by global warming or something. No, when it's for fertility, it's the other way around. So obviously Africa, you can see, has a much higher fertility rate than anywhere else practically, other than like Pakistan. You can see China is in particular trouble with a fertility rate of 0.6 to 0.7. So that's less than one. It's nearly one child for every like 3 people or something being born for every 3 people. And of course, you need a 2.1 replacement rate to replace the 2 parents, and also people who die from accident or aren't able to have children or whatever it is. And as you can see, the Western world, and well, most of the world, frankly, is falling below that. And so we are going to see a population decline. Now, that there are ups and downs to this. One of the ups is that housing becomes more readily available. One of the downs to this is that things become more expensive. So one of the, I recently spoke at the Natalist conference, which we'll talk about in a second. But one of the presentations there was from an economist who pointed out that population causes things to be cheaper. The more people producing, the more people innovating, the more people you have part of a consumer market, this all adds to things getting much cheaper. And so if you have a much smaller population, things become more expensive. And this will have a knock-on effect for a lot of things going forward, in just like in all areas of life, if we have fewer people around. Now, the Western answer to this is just, well, we'll just have mass immigration, which assumes that the birth rate in all of the countries will remain static. Well, it won't, actually. We already see that, again, outside of Africa, almost everyone else's birth rate has cratered. So at some point, there just aren't going to be the people in other countries to bring here. And even if we did, why would they want to come here if everything's really expensive? And the cost of living here, I mean, in Britain at the moment, is insanely expensive. But if also the countries have been kind of left devastated from mass immigration, because mass immigration is not just some value neutral proposition where we just take X widgets from one country and move them over to another. No, there's a cause and effect and consequences that come with all of this. And that means that, okay, if you bring in, 10 million people from random countries around the world, well, they don't treat the place they've come to with any great deal of respect. And it could be that their own countries aren't exactly amazing places to begin with, but they haven't treated with respect. So why would we expect them to treat our country with respect? And especially if this has a knock-on effect of encouraging, say, I don't know, 10,000 millionaires a year to flee Britain, in the case of Britain, well, then you're left with a country that has just a lower quality of human capital, is I think how they would describe it. People who are just not as competent, not as capable, not making as much money, and are, again, not able to upkeep the country in the way to which we may have been accustomed. And so replacing those people with people who have a very poor level of education, don't have strong social sentiments, and are just introduced into a place that they don't understand, and are just asked to get on with it, well, that changes the nature of things. So just bringing in people doesn't solve the problem. And that, again, comes on with a whole host of new problems. So, okay, let's assume you do just replace those people with people from Africa or whatever, then things change on a social level. The sort of spiritual makeup of the country changes. It's chaos, right? This isn't going to solve the problem. And especially with the institutions that we rely on. Right? For example, the NHS and the pension system in the West, health services and pension systems in the West, is a major public policy issue, because we're looking around saying, well, what if there aren't enough people in 20 or 30 years' time to upkeep the increasingly aged population that we have? And this is, again, real issues. They're just not immediate issues, right? These are issues that are going to be coming down the pipeline in like 20 or 30 years. So if you're someone who doesn't look beyond the horizon of their own immediate person and what they immediately need, this is not an issue that matters to you. In fact, this is an issue that you might think this is a weird thing for you to care about. There's weird people who care about this. Well, I care about what happens in the future because I have children. I'd like to have grandchildren, and I'm sure I'd like them to have grandchildren and children of their own. So the continuity of my own civilization is something that is important to me. And I guess that's one of the things that makes me right wing. But this is a real and pressing issue, and Elon Musk has been calling attention to this for years now. He's a very strong pro-natalist, and so when I was invited to go speak at the Natalist conference this year in Texas, I said, yeah, I'd love to, because there are so many different things that are attacking the birth rates in not just Western countries, all over the place. And we need to be able to understand and comprehend the scope of things. You know, a lot of young people say, well, I don't want to have children because the economy is just not good enough. I can't really afford it. And that's not an illegitimate argument by any stretch of the imagination. But there are other things, such as the representation of parenthood that we see around us. It used to be when I was a kid, the world was geared to parents, right? It was understood that parents were the most important people in the world because they are essentially the trunk of the tree that is our own civilization. And if you want to have some sort of elaborate or alternative lifestyle, you were still relying upon the parents who raised the children to make sure that this civilization continued into the future. They were the generative engine of our civilization. And so our civilization was geared around it. Well, that's not what we see now, is it? Almost everything now revolves around fetishizing those people who are not the generative engine of our civilization. Minority communities who obviously don't reproduce British people, or people who just don't reproduce at all, are the people to whom modern Western societies are most concerned. And that's an issue. That encourages people not to become parents. That encourages them not to join the great wheel of existence. And that's not wise if we want a future for our countries. And so that's my motivation for going there. Now, a lot of other people at this conference had their own motivations, like various different sort of religious or left-wing perspectives on why these things need to be done, why we need to have children. And yet, for some reason, the media reacted to this as if it's just this far-right conference. Now, Wired, for some reason, have told a lot of lies in this article. The conference was not $10,000 per person to attend. It was $1,000. Now, that's not cheap, but there's a deliberate sort of filtering mechanism in that. It was not it was held at the AT&T Conference Center, which is a big and lovely thing, and obviously expensive itself. So you need to be able to afford these things, but also it self-selects for people who are not really that interested in the subject, to bring people who are only interested or are committed to the concept of natalism, and which, again, the fact that we need a natalist conference reveals the paucity of thought in this area, right? The fact that there's no public policy that's focused around, well, hang on a second, don't we need the next generation? We need generations, right? A civilization is built on generations. So why is it we don't have this? Why is it the government thinking, oh yeah, well, obviously we need to encourage people to at least reproduce themselves so there can be a state, there can be the NHS or the pensions or whatever, so the economy grows. There are so many reasons that governments would want natalist policies and yet don't. They have anti-natalist policies. So it's just very peculiar that this thing has to exist, but it does have to exist. This is something that we have to be conscious about, because we just have far too much control over not only our own civilization, but our own bodies these days. Like, we have so much control that we can make these decisions rather than them being forced upon us by nature. But okay, well, I'm sorry, but we have to be conscious of this now, right? This is something we have to think about. So anyway, far-right influence, again, there were there were right-wing people there, but there were also left-wing people there, because this is an issue that affects everyone. It's actually not a partisan issue as to whether you get married and have children, because most women still want to have children. There's just reasons that are like practical, immediate reasons. Like, well, it's not safe. The economy isn't doing well. I don't know how this balances with my career, whether you think that's a good thing or not. Like these are the things that women think about. So it's okay, well, these are the things we have to think about, aren't they? You know, if we want to have a civilization in future, we have to think about these things. And yet Wired here was trying to essentially stigmatize the concept, stigmatize the conference. Far right influencers are hosting it. 10,000. No, it wasn't. The hosts weren't far right influencers. The hosts just seemed to be reasonable Republicans, as far as I could tell. But also, it wasn't $10,000, and it's a matchmaking weekend to repopulate the Earth. I mean, so they actually did a thing saying, look, about 25% to 30% of the people who attended were not married. So they actually did have like a matchmaking event, but that wasn't the point of this. Most of the people there were, of course, married with lots of children of their own. I'm married. I've got 4 children. I was one of the people who had the least number of children there, by the way. FYI. So, but this, I didn't see any on-site ministers there, so attendees can get married. Nothing like that happened that I saw. As far as I could tell, it was like, dating. There was if you're single and you've come here and you're interested in meeting someone with like-minded, similar interest, maybe you want to date, but no one got married on site as far as I'm aware. But again, notice the sort of attempt to kind of scare people or scare their own audience, their own left-wing audience. No, you need to be afraid of this. This is a scary thing. Getting married, you don't want that, do you? It's like, why wouldn't you want that? Like, don't left-wing people get lonely? Don't they want a future? Don't they want children? Don't they want to have a legacy? Don't they want any of these things? Or literally, are they just about cooming? Are they literally just about consuming whatever they can and getting off as much as they can? Right? And if that's the case, gross. Like, what kind of people are you cultivating, Wired? Like, why are you appealing to these people? You're like, oh yeah, we've created a massive audience of total degenerates. It's like, oh, good job. Well done. I don't know why you've done this. But the Guardian wanted you to just be terrified and afraid. It's a Nazi conference, is it? The US Natalist conference to host race science promoters and eugenicists. It's like, oh. Eugenicism used to be a really progressive thing at the beginning of the 20th century. So just weird. I bet there are articles on the Guardian promoting eugenicism, right? But the point is, it doesn't matter, because the issue, I didn't hear anything about eugenics there, right? I watched the speeches. I'm not saying I watched most of the speeches. I didn't watch every single one. So there may well have been something eugenicist there, but I didn't see anything like that, because the thing is about eugenics is it kind of implies that, yeah, the population is going to grow going forward. So, should we operate human control over the nature of the population? Now, I'm personally actually against eugenics in a kind of strict sense like that, because I can understand from the position of, well, we should probably try and filter out congenital diseases, right? That itself is a form of eugenics. That's understandable. Yeah, why not? But I'm not in favor of manipulating humans to be like super people going forward into the future. I can see the argument for it, but there's just something too mechanical about it for me that I don't approve of. I would rather us just strive to be virtuous and improve ourselves that way. And race science promoters. Oh, okay. So whatever. I'm not even going to get into that. But the point is, what are they trying to do here? They're trying to make you afraid of this subject, as if, right, to be interested in just the fact that our population is going to collapse. In like, for going back to like some concrete examples, right? Italy's population replacement is less than 1 now. So in like 50 years, Italy's population is just going to halve. That's going to be a real issue for Italy and Italians. That's going to be a real problem that many of them have so many knock-on consequences. And yet the Guardian's like, by the way, they're Nazis. And it's like, okay, but they're not Nazis. I didn't see anyone who I could characterize as a Nazi there. I saw lots of well-meaning mothers and fathers who were also political activists, who were also concerned about the state of things. And not everyone there was, of course, a mother and a father. But it was people who were just generally concerned about the health of our civilization. Is that enough to get you branded a Nazi now? According to The Guardian, it is. So just very peculiar. Very peculiar. Anyway, the BBC did an article on it. And they were more accurate than Wired, I have to admit. The event cost $1,000 to attend. They pointed out that I was there. This year's speakers includes Carl Benjamin, who has links to far-right activist Tommy Robinson. I'm friends with Tommy. I think that what he's done has been brave against the establishment, and I think he's been treated in an absolutely abominable, monstrous way. He's one of those people who just isn't allowed human rights because he's like, by the way, guys, I think there might be an issue with multiculturalism. And he's currently in jail. Personally, I think he's a political prisoner. And then Charles Cornish Dale, friend of the show, Roaring Nationalist. Again, PhD. He's not like he's not someone who doesn't know what he's talking about. And yet, just scare people. Oh, far right. I mean, they didn't even smear me as far right, actually. They actually just called me by my name, which is nice. Things are getting better, slowly but surely. But look at the response. It's like an unholy alliance, says Catherine Packerlook. Never heard of her. She's an economist, mother of 8 and stepmother of 6. Okay. But I'm a dad. I don't think it's an unholy alliance. I think it's a good thing. Why would someone who has so many children be like, yeah, I'm against other people having children? But she says she spoke at the conference but was too reluctant to call herself a pro-natalist. It's a complicated movement. It includes people of very different positions. Yeah, this isn't an ideological position that is exclusive to any one position, nor is it necessarily consistent. But it is something we have to think about. The causes of why our civilization is currently in decline are going to be connected to our reluctance to have children. So we need to think about it. But they say one thing they have in common is they want their message to be heard at the highest levels of government. Yeah, why not? Why wouldn't we want that? I don't even know if I call myself a natalist, but this is a real issue. This is something that needs to be fixed. And we need to think about re-gearing our civilization towards its own reproduction into the future. This should not be in any way controversial, and yet we're effectively being smeared as far right and Nazis. What is wrong with you people? This is a totally reasonable thing. But moreover, what it does to the individual to become a parent is change their focus, right? It changes their position in the world and makes them realize that actually it's not just about you, it's about other people. There are other people you love in the world more than yourself, and you want well for them at your own expense, frankly. It's you're not looking for your own self-interest. You're looking for someone else's self-interest. And so I guess this is why they're like, oh, this is far right. This is just all far right. Because I'm not actually concerned about my own interests right now. I'm concerned about what is good for my children as children growing up and coming into the world. And so I guess if your job is help destroy Western civilization, you are looking at that and going, wow, this is a real threat to our political project, isn't it? And in many ways, maybe it is. Maybe it is. But the point being is that we have to do this. If they want the civilization to destroy in the future, we've got to make sure the civilization is there. And so, as is commonly said in the sort of natalist movement, the future belongs to those who turn up for it. If these people aren't producing children and aren't reproducing their own values in their children, this sort of thing is eventually just going to die away, isn't it? So I can see why they're worried.